He is the Chiefs Analytics Officer, the man behind the DVOA at FTN Fantasy. Aaron Schatz joins us in the studio today on StreamYard. Aaron, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good, guys. How are you doing?
Excellent.
Just ask the question of my co-host. I'll ask it of you. Of the two teams sitting out this week, which one do you think has the better path to make it to the Super Bowl?
I agree that it's Kansas City because of the Detroit defensive injuries. Even with Alex Anzalone back, there's still a lot of injuries. And the fact that it's likely that the divisional round opponent for the Lions will be tougher than the divisional round opponent for the Chiefs.
Yeah, and following up on that, Aaron, just looking at the rankings today, the Chiefs are the third-ranked AFC team behind Baltimore, who is at the top. Buffalo is fifth. That said, because of the way the bracket's setting up, no matter what happens in round one, they will not have to see either of those two teams in round two, and they would only have to see one of them in round three. So even though they are quote-unquote lesser, how does that change their odds to get to the Super Bowl versus if they ended up falling to the 2 or 3 and had to play one of those teams over the course of multiple weeks to make it to the Super Bowl?
Oh, it makes it much likely that they're going to make it there. I mean, we definitely have the Lions and Chiefs as the most likely teams to make it to the Super Bowl, in part because they have that bye in the first round. And so the Chiefs, even though in my ratings they're below the Bills and the Ravens, they're more likely to make it there. And the nightmare was to have to play both the Bills and the Ravens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, it's the nightmare for the Bills and Ravens because they have to play each other. And then the Chiefs, whoever wins that game, gets to play the Chiefs, whereas the Chiefs don't, the Chargers or Texans or whoever should be, if some team upsets the Bills or Ravens, that makes it just even easier.
Exactly.
The Texans have had an interesting year. I mean, we started this year. They were a hot, sexy pick to maybe unseat the Chiefs in the AFC. Things did obviously not go that way. But at the same time, they really kind of had a stress-free season in terms of their division because their division just was not that good. The offensive numbers have been very pedestrian. Where is the path to the Texans winning on Saturday afternoon?
I mean, the defense is the path, right? Everything about the Texans is defense bad. Defense good, offense bad. Like everything you look up about the Texans comes out to that. And they lost Stephon Diggs, and then they lost Tank Dell, and the offensive line has had all kinds of problems, especially in the interior, and Stroud hasn't been as good this year, and everything comes out to their offense being a problem. They can win, certainly, and they have the home field advantage, and they have a really good defense this year. And the Chargers are weaker up the middle in the offensive line, right? So they'd have to stunt a lot because Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter are going to get blocked by Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, who are very good.
Aaron, earlier this week, you mentioned that Baltimore finished the season as the number 7 team in the history of DVOA. You also noted a lot of people, of course, are going to be skeptical about them because the 19 team, the team last year, they also were really high on the all-time list, and those teams did not win championships. And in 19, they went one and done. Why will this year be different with the 2024 Ravens?
I mean, the history is filled with teams that didn't win it all until the year that they did. Mm-hmm. So the Ravens have this history over the last couple of years of playing really well against other good teams, right? Like their point differential against the other playoff teams is over 100, and I think the next best team is at like 25. Like, it's ridiculous how much better they are against good teams. And then they do things like play the Raiders and commit a bunch of penalties and lose by 2 points or whatever that was. So, I mean, they're only playing the good teams in the playoffs. So, they should be up for the task. And it's not like they got slaughtered last year, right? I mean, if Zay Flowers doesn't fumble at the goal line, and that game's a lot closer. So, the toughest reason for the Ravens to not make it is that the Bills and Chiefs are also very good.
So is the path to a Pittsburgh upset the Ravens having one of those end-of-game Raider moments? Because
or like what happened when those teams played first, which is that Chris Boswell hit 6 field goals instead of including a couple over 50, while Justin Tucker missed 2.
Yeah, and Aaron, along the lines of the top of the AFC, I wonder how the last month or so has maybe changed how you view what could unfold there, because I think we had you on last before Thanksgiving, and at that point we were talking about Kansas City and just the way in which they were winning all of these games in close fashion. They lost to the Bills, but now a month later, they beat playoff teams and they kind of dominated them on the way to a really good end of the regular season.
Yep, Chiefs played much better at the end of the regular season, and they look a lot better now than they did a month ago. You are absolutely right, and they're healthier now than they were a month ago, and everything looks better now than it did a month ago.
Incredible.
Speaking of the last month, my eyes tell me that Buffalo defensively has backslid. What do your numbers say, and is there a concern in Buffalo defensively heading into this postseason?
I mean, they're backsliding a little bit, but some of that is a Week 18 game where they sat starters, so who cares? They're still a good defense. I'm not tremendously worried. Should have Milano back. They've got Bernard back. They've got Christian Benford in the secondary, and they've got most of their injured guys back. So they should be still a good defense. But, I mean, they're mostly driven by offense. That's the second best offense in the league.
Aaron, speaking of backsliding, of course, Pittsburgh did not have a very good end to their season. How much of that is kind of reverting to the mean versus what they had been in the first few months? How much of it was their schedule strength increasing, and obviously seeing teams that, division foes, so they're going to know them really well?
A lot of it is schedule strength. We knew going into the season, we wrote all the time in July and August, hey, wow, Pittsburgh's schedule is incredibly backloaded. Look at how much harder it's going to be down the stretch for them. Now, Cleveland ended up not being as good as we expected. So losing to Cleveland looks pretty bad. But, I mean, the other teams that they played near the end of the season, I mean, they got clobbered by Kansas City and Baltimore, right? Those are hard teams. So a lot of what we saw from Pittsburgh is the schedule was easier in the first half, and it was harder in the second half.
Talking with Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy, joining us here on Unsportsmanlike Conduct. There's a reason Bucs Commanders has the highest total of the 6 games this weekend. The strength of these teams is offense, particularly in the run game. Which defense do you think is better equipped to slow down the other side in this playoff game?
If Marshawn Lattimore is healthy, Washington's defense. Because Lattimore makes a big difference as far as pass coverage of Mike Evans. But both of these defenses were poor this year. I have Tampa Bay's defense 16th, but worse in recent weeks. And I have Washington's defense 23rd. So, yeah, these are not good defenses, especially against the pass.
And by the way, for folks who follow Aaron on Twitter, FTN Stats Hub is free through the wild card round. Basically, what we do with we do a thing called Heckle the Echo, where we break down Nebraska's games. It's kind of the same thing, but it's in real detail, and it shows you color-coded. The darker the shade is, the better a team is. You definitely want to check it out, and it's only free through this weekend. Obviously, for subscribers, they get that all season long. And one of the things I noticed on there, Aaron, was when it comes to this Tampa-Washington game, Tampa's got the number 1 blitz rate in the league, but Jaden Daniels and Washington's pass game have very respectable numbers when either being blitzed or just generally against pressure. Do you think Tampa's going to have to change things up a bit to try to slow down Jaden Daniels?
I think Todd Bowles does what he does, right? There's 2 strategies in the NFL. One is do your thing and challenge the other team to beat it. And the other is attack your opponent's weakness. And I think the Bucs are more of a do our thing and make you beat it type of defense. So I'm sure they're still going to be blitzing. And by the way, the same is true opposite. Washington blitzes a lot, and Mayfield is very good against the blitz.
Aaron, it was interesting looking again at that story from earlier in the week and I want to ask about the number 1 seed now in the NFC, and that's the Lions, because you mentioned that they accomplished something that's very rare. They were top 5 in all 3 units this season, outside of Baltimore a couple of years ago, or Buffalo a couple of years ago, rather, Baltimore last year. This very much seems to correlate with winning a championship. And so I wonder if you think, did they just throw us all off the scent a little bit with the injuries and the defense having a bit of a lull, because they finished the season very strong across the board right now, and now they get the bye and they don't have to play until the divisional round?
Yeah, but that's one game. That's one game where the defense played much better. Otherwise, over the last few weeks, the defense, the question is it all Anzalone or is it all the injuries? And it just so happened that Anzalone was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back as far as when their defense started playing badly.
Yeah.
And I just think having Anzalone back is good, but it doesn't solve all the injury problems. I have never seen a great team over the first half of the season get slaughtered by non-quarterback injuries the way
Crazy.
this year's Lions have been.
It has been crazy.
So what do you think then of their path? We talked about the Chiefs and just how advantageous it looks with the potential, either Chargers or Texans and then whatever happens on the other side of the bracket. The NFC, much more stacked, though. It's different, obviously, now at the bottom with the Packers falling off a bit, and they've had a lot of injuries as well, and it seems like that'll be tough to get by Philadelphia. So what do you think of their path, divisional round, and if they were to make it in the conference championship?
I mean, it's harder because whoever they play in the divisional round is likely to be better than like whoever the Chiefs play, like I said. I think you have to, because of the injuries, you have to favor Philadelphia to come out of the NFC. But man, it will be so much fun if Detroit does. Like that's what we want, but you can't favor it.
Yeah.
A lot of folks have been down on Green Bay. Green Bay folks have been down on Green Bay. The 1-5 division record certainly does not help. But when I looked at your stats hub, it looks like in some avenues it's a fairly even matchup with the mighty Eagles. Where does this game come down to, in your opinion?
They've been losing games by 2 and 3 points. Like those are essentially ties. So when you look at the future, I mean, yes, it's better to win than to lose. But when you look at the future, the Green Bay has played very well. They played very, very well from week 11 to week 16. The thing is, the last couple weeks, they haven't been as good. So now all the Green Bay fans are like, woe is us, woe is us. And yes, Christian Watson is hurt, and that's a problem because it takes away a lot of their deep threat. So the Eagles are the better team, but the Packers are surprisingly good over the last half of the season.
What's your view of that Monday night matchup? Of course, we were waiting to see what would happen on Sunday night between the Lions and the Vikings. And then some Sunday stuff happened, and it ended up flipping the 3 and the 4 seed around. And so we get Los Angeles, hopefully hosting that game in Los Angeles versus Minnesota. What's the read on this one?
Vikings love to blitz, and Matthew Stafford was the best quarterback in the league against the blitz with a minimum of 100 attempts. So if Minnesota says we're doing our thing and we dare you to beat us, the Rams are going to beat them. Because Puka Nacua is like the best receiver against the blitz. Hot route, 7-yard slant, high, bang, like just over and over again.
And on the other side of the matchup, a lot of folks watch that game on Sunday and how Sam Darnold got pressured. We know the Rams have that great young defensive line. I mean, is that the roadmap, is just get in Sam Darnold's face and force him to make high throws and poor throws?
Yeah, look, he's not going to be that bad in the red zone again. And the Rams are 29th against deep passes, and Darnold led the league in value on deep passes. The problem with deep passes is you have to stand up long enough to throw them.
Aaron, which of the 6 or 7s on either side do you think could be like the squirreliest throughout the playoffs? I mean, I guess you just said some kind words about Green Bay.
Yeah, the Packers are the best of the 6 and 7. The Packers are the best of the 6 and 7 teams, although I do kind of like the Commanders to beat the Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Like I said, FTN Stats Hub free through this weekend. Check out ftnfantasy.com. It's a really cool statistical breakdown, analytical statistical breakdown of each of these matchups. And if you're a member of FTN Fantasy, you get them for every game, including next weekend and the weekend after and the weekend after that.
You can look through, you can filter it in all kinds of ways. You can see all kinds of breakdowns. There's tons of stuff in there.
And it's a great website, and Aaron is always a great guest, and we always appreciate the time. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the playoffs. It's no longer Super Wild Card Weekend.
They don't call it that anymore?
I think we're just Wild Card Weekend now. I think we've calmed ourselves down.
They dropped the Super very quietly. Just kind of dropped the Super.
Well, we'll remind them.
Kind of like how McDonald's just quietly dropped the hamburger. Now it's all cheeseburger.
Interesting. All right.
Aaron, have a great weekend.
Thank you, Aaron.
Hey, you guys too. Enjoy the games.
All right. Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy.